This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Pressure mounts on both sides of the Ethiopian conflict to end hostilities. 11 people killed in clashes between government troops and gunmen in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And businesses eye new opportunities as China International Import Expo kicks off in Shanghai. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and with the latest in business is Rama.
That's right, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Egypt's foreign currency reserves have gone up to $40 billion. We'll look at the latest numbers. And oil prices have risen ahead of a meeting of the OPEC Plus ministers. We'll have the details of that outcome and plenty more in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks for that, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. We begin the hour in Ethiopia, where African and Western nations are piling pressure on all sides to end hostilities. The U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, has arrived in Addis Ababa to press for a halt to military operations and a start to ceasefire talks. African Union Commissioner Chair Musa Faki Mahamat said he met Feltman to discuss efforts towards dialogue and political solutions to end the conflict, amid reports that Tigrayan forces have made advances towards the Ethiopian capital this week. This has raised concerns among many African leaders who are calling for a peace agreement between all parties involved in the conflict. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has announced an East African bloc leaders meeting to discuss the conflict. Well, CGTN's Giram Chalana joins us for the latest from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Hi, Giram. There's rising diplomatic pressure on both sides, Giram, in the conflict to negotiate. What is the latest?
So, Hannah, first, let's talk about the pressure that you've been saying, of the diplomatic pressure. The United Nations, through Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, the African Union, Chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat, EU through a statement, and also the United States, all called for the end of this war and the beginning of a roundtable discussions between the government, the central government, and the TPLF, and that should be done as soon as possible. And then the United States has already sent a special envoy to the country. Jeffrey Feltman, President Joe Biden's envoy to the Eastern Africa region, is already in Addis Ababa and expected to speak to several leaders of the country, including the foreign ministry and perhaps the prime minister himself, on this particular topic of starting perhaps a negotiation, a roundtable discussion for a peaceful resolution of a one-year-old conflict which claimed lives, and then again also the end of the war as soon as possible. So regional pressure is also there. As you've said, President Yoweri Museveni is calling for a regional meeting. IGAD has issued a statement saying the same thing. So this pressure is mounting by the day, and we hope and believe that in the next few days we might be hearing a positive news out of this, and perhaps heralding the end of this agonizing war in the northern part of Ethiopia, Hannah.
Thank you so much for giving us all those details. Giram Chala speaking to us from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Let's head over to Sudan now, where it's been a little over a week since the military seized power there. The UN Security Council has urged Sudanese military and civilian government officials to end the crisis. The UN Special Envoy in Sudan has expressed hope that the two sides' ongoing discussions will soon bear fruit. Nawa Muhyiddin has more.
Mediation efforts are underway to find a solution for Sudan's political crisis. But before the military takeover, there was political polarization between the transitional counterparts. Pro-military groups wanted the military to seize power and appoint a new government, while pro-democracy supporters wanted civilian leaders to take control. After the military's power grab, which saw Prime Minister Hamdok detained, residents of the capital Khartoum are still divided.
When we rallied in 2019, we protested against al-Bashir and his Islamic military regime. Hamdok was doing great steps towards democratic change. We wanted democracy and a civilian rule, and can't accept to get back to dictatorship.
The generals should form a government out of technocrats, and then the political party should have time to be prepared for elections. Hamdok and the political parties weren't elected. They came in certain circumstances, and they ruined it.
Mass demonstrations erupted over the weekend. 4 protesters were killed and 10 were injured in clashes with authorities, according to Sudan's Doctors' Committee. Analysts like Osman Mergani think the reinstatement of the transitional government can be a solution.
It's not logical to sustain democracy out of a military coup. Even if we believed the military want to save the country, showing goodwill by releasing the detained politicians is the first step towards the solution. Things should get back to a day before the takeover.
Many internal and international efforts continue to contain the dispute in Sudan, but generals and politicians are clinging to their decisions. Prime Minister Hamdok has refused to be part of the military administration and is sticking on his legitimacy, but the generals insist on forming a new government.
Although many businesses have resumed work a week after the military takeover, there is a cautious silence in many streets of the Sudanese capital. People here are awaiting solutions to end the political turmoil. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Well, let's turn our attention to the DRC now, where at least 11 people have been killed in violent clashes between government troops and armed men in the East of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Authorities say the gunmen attacked police stations in the city of Bukavu on Wednesday, but were repelled by the police and the army. CGTN's Kisa Chamringa has more from Kinshasa.
A group of armed men launched an overnight attack in the DRC's eastern city of Bukavu. The Congolese army and the police engaged them in fierce gun battles. According to the governor of South Kivu province, 8 gunmen, 2 soldiers and a police officer were killed in the fighting. The army says it captured 36 of the attackers. The gunmen attacked several police stations to try and free their colleagues who had been detained earlier, but they were pushed back. A local army commander blamed the attack on a new militia called the Coalition of Congolese Patriots for the application of Article 64. The article in the DRC constitution calls on Congolese to oppose anyone exercising illegitimate power. An investigation is underway to identify the attackers. According to the UN, the east of the DRC has more than 100 armed groups fighting over land, political power, and the control of minerals. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's now shift gears to China, where the China International Import Expo has opened in Shanghai. The 6-day trade show will bring together a record of 3,000 companies globally, including some participants from the least developed countries. They'll be showcasing products in a wide range of sectors, from pharmaceuticals to high-end consumer goods and automobiles. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the ceremony via video link at the opening ceremony earlier today.
China will firmly uphold the common interests of the world. China will take an active part in cooperation within the United Nations, the WTO, the G20, APEC, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and other institutions, and promote more discussions on such issues as trade and investment, the digital economy, and green and low-carbon development. China will promote high-quality Belt and Road cooperation so that more countries and peoples will benefit from its development opportunities and real outcomes. China will actively join in global efforts to tackle climate change and safeguard food and energy security, and provide more assistance to fellow developing countries within the framework of South-South cooperation.
Well, still on the China International Import, it is the world's biggest import-oriented event that's in line with its goal of further opening up the Chinese economy. Held in Shanghai, it's a platform for thousands of exhibitors worldwide to expand their market, open new sales channels, and set up new research and development centers to further expand their businesses. CGTN's Wu Lei has more.
It's the first time for Pakistani businessman Habib and his brother Jan to participate in the China International Import Expo. In addition to showcasing Pakistani traditional handmade carpets, Habib hopes to introduce these special Himalaya salt labs.
This is my first step, and through CIE, I wish to get other wholesale people, other trade people, other travel agencies, to come and learn more about my salt lamps and spread it out of Shanghai over there. So definitely I'm looking for more details, more points out of Shanghai.
Around 3,000 companies are taking part in this year's CIE, the fourth since it began in 2018. Like other exhibitors, Habib believes the CIE is a good opportunity to expand into China, as it's the only import-themed expo in the world. While many small and mid-foreign companies choose Shanghai as a first choice to tap into Chinese market, and a lot of big multinational companies who have been in China for decades open more research and development centers to better serve Chinese consumers. Japanese cosmetics company Shiseido has been in China for 40 years. The company just launched its third R&D center in Fengxian district of Shanghai, aiming to strengthen cooperation with hundreds of local cosmetic and tech companies.
Currently, for the Chinese consumer, is really looking forward to the new beauty solutions. We really want to cooperate with them and to make it for the new innovations together with the local companies. And in addition, I really expected to explore to the further opportunity, not only for the cosmetic, but also the ingestible beauty or the beauty tech.
Official data from the Shanghai Municipal Commission of Commerce shows over 800 multinational companies have set up their regional headquarters in Shanghai. There are also more than 500 research and development centers in the city. Both these numbers top that of other cities across China. Many say CIE's impact, along with Shanghai's favorable business environment, will help global sellers soar higher in the Chinese market. Wu Lei, CGTN, Shanghai.
For years, Europe has been the main destination for Kenyan flowers. However, the lucrative industry is now eyeing China as it seeks to diversify its exports. Redlands Roses is among the companies that have made inroads into China. But as CGTN's Daniel Arab Moore reports, high tariffs remain an impediment.
Roses, they do not hurriedly bloom, but once they do at this flower farm tucked away northeast of the Kenyan capital Nairobi, they come in almost all shades. Redlands is one of the Kenyan companies that produces roses for export to Europe and most recently China.
So the Chinese market is a very diverse market. It's very fashionable in the sense that every new variety that comes in, they want to try it out. Yeah, so that is the one thing that we really appreciate about the Chinese market.
The company started exporting cut flowers to China in 2015. China is one of the top markets that Kenya has long been eyeing because of its keen interest in Kenyan premium flowers. The Chinese government has gone the extra mile to encourage trade with African countries, making it possible for Kenyan flower growers to access the Chinese market.
We believe that China remains one of the major markets that we can do business with in the cut flower and ornamentals subsector. And we are very keen. We are always there during the shows that happen so that we start promoting the brand of Kenyan flowers in the Chinese market.
While the country cut a niche in Europe, it's yet to maximize the Chinese market. High tariffs and lack of direct flight to China's main cities has limited Redlands Roses to only one destination, Guangzhou.
The freight charges have become really high. All our clients are complaining that for them to buy the same number of boxes now costs them almost twice as much compared to before. So now it limits their purchase capacity.
Kenya's Flower Council says plans are underway to create a better business environment.
We have a strategy, and the Chinese market is one of them in terms of expansion. We call it emerging market. And we have aligned these also to the government's vision around the export promotion strategy so that we are working in line with what the government is looking at.
In 2020, Kenya exported 173,000 metric tons of cut flowers, employing over 200,000 people directly and an estimated 2 million indirectly. Still, it's a start. Redlands and others are optimistic about the future. And for some, like Joyce Mugure, More market means much needed employment. Mugure has been a flower farm worker for 11 years.
I've been working here for long, trying to get something to assist in my family. And I've seen that this work is very good, and I like it very much. So since it has helped me, I have gained experience of how I can support my family.
The East African country is among the top 4 suppliers of cut flowers and ornamentals in the world. For now, cut flowers remain Kenya's second largest export after tea, contributing around 1% of the country's gross domestic product. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
It's time now for us to take a short break and return on more on Africa Live, including the price of coal, parts of South Africa reeling from air pollution and respiratory diseases. And the UN says COVID-19 pandemic could lead to an HIV surge in West and Central Africa. Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. To news from the COP26 climate summit being held in Glasgow. More than 40 countries have agreed to phase out coal-fired power and stop building new plants. Some of the largest economies in that group have committed to phase out their use of coal for electricity generation by the 2030s. However, no concrete dates were given. Smaller economies also made their pledges for the same by the 2040s, but didn't provide specific dates either. Climate experts say the pledges don't go far enough to tackle climate change. Despite this, the UK's COP26 president, Alex Sharma, has hailed pledges made by the countries.
Today, I think we can say that the end of coal is in sight. The progress we've seen over the past 2 years would have seemed like a lofty ambition when we took on the COP presidency back in 2019. Who would have thought back then that today we're able to say that we're choking off international coal financing, or that we would see a shift away from domestic coal power?
Let's now cross over to John Beaver, who is at the summit and he's in Glasgow. John, great to see you again. A key issue of discussion is how to end reliance on coal. What solutions, John, are you hearing about being offered at the summit?
Well, quite simply, it's using more in the way of renewable energy. It's huge investments in things like solar power, which is so important, they say here. If you look at Africa, for example, a huge amount of sunshine. What it needs is the money and the infrastructure in order for those nations to be able to move away from coal and to use this clean, green, renewable energy source. As we've been hearing there, we've got 40 countries who've pledged to do away with coal. Like you were saying, the timelines, though, leave something to be desired, say climate activists. 2030s for major economies, 2040s for smaller economies. So I think we're going to want some more details as to when people are actually going to be making this switch. And again, of course, there are a lot of criticisms that that these are grand ideas, but we need more policies, we need more definite answers. But definitely today there is a sense of optimism that the age of coal is coming to an end. Interesting to note, though, that some of the major polluters when it comes to coal, people such as China, Russia, the United States, have not signed this pledge. They're very reliant on coal. They haven't got on board yet, although they have pledged to drastically reduce the amount of coal being used.
John, let's talk a little bit about developing nations, and it's not just at this summit, but they have been saying for the longest time that they need help to ditch fossil fuels such as coal for cleaner energy sources. A lot of talk about South Africa, what's been happening there, and the deal that could be possible for South Africa. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been hearing about this huge deal to South Africa. $8.5 billion is being talked about, and that's going to help South Africa transition away from coal to these more renewable energy sources. Now, coal is South Africa's major power source, and South Africa, of course, is a country that sometimes struggles to keep the lights on. So switching away from its biggest power source is going to be a huge deal. But what that means for the rest of Africa is that they want to use this deal with South Africa as a blueprint, and they then want to use that in other countries. So expect to see a lot of interest across the continent about how things progress with South Africa, because a lot of people are going to be looking to that saying, okay, we need the same funding, we need the same support from these wealthy Western nations mostly, who have made their money off the back of coal when they industrialized many years ago. Now they need to support those countries who are going through those early steps as well. So expect to see a lot more about that in the coming months and years.
Thank you so much for that, John. John Beaver speaking to us from COP26 in Glasgow. Well, South Africa's coal industry is the world's fifth largest. It employs about 90,000 miners and generates 80% of the country's electricity. However, health costs of the coal industry in some parts of the country are high. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar has the details.
South Africa is the world's 12th largest greenhouse gas emitter. That's according to the non-profit Global Carbon Atlas. The country also stands to be one of the big losers from climate change. The coal industry supplies feedstock for about a quarter of the country's liquid fuel for vehicles. But despite this milestone, experts say one of South Africa's largest cities, Johannesburg, is among the world's most polluted. Respiratory diseases are very common among adults and children here because of the pollution they are exposed to on a daily basis.
The two commonest problems that we treat in children and in adults are conditions called allergic rhinitis, and later on is called sinusitis, and also the chest condition that we commonly treat with regards to allergies is asthma. So those are the two common conditions that we see quite a lot in our area. In fact, most of the doctors around, we have sort of become experts in treating allergic rhinitis and asthma, simply because there's so much of it. And I also mentioned the fact that one could say is environmental.
We can't live comfortably because of the dust and coal that smells from the mine dump. It comes with smoke.
In 2017, British air pollution expert Mike Holland calculated that the health impacts of Eskom's emissions alone cost South Africa $2.37 billion every year. This is more than Eskom's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization.
There are 12 coal-fired power stations in the Mpumalanga area in South Africa. And these are some of the world's biggest power stations. You're talking about, in excess of 4,000 megawatts. These power stations do not have the pollution control mechanisms on because they were developed in the old apartheid system.
Coal is now in the crosshairs of a global push to replace it with cleaner fuels. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Well, many parts of Kenya are in the midst of a severe drought that has affected crops and livestock. Cattle, sheep, and goats have died due to lack of pasture and water. But farmers in some of the worst hit areas, including Garissa County, are using irrigation to continue growing their crops despite the adverse weather. CGTN's Nick Mudimba has the details.
The northeastern part of Kenya is going through one of the deadliest droughts recorded. The rains have delayed and farmers have had to act quickly. Most of them are pastoralists. Many of the animals have died, and the few livestock remaining here are feeding on dry grass. Pasture is hard to come by, and it's only a matter of time before some of these animals succumb to drought. Many people in this region are now relying on crop farming to survive. River Tana, the longest in Kenya, is the main source of water. Farmers have connected pipes to the river, and diesel-powered engines pump the water from the river to canals, irrigating their crops. The people here grow a variety of crops that need consistent watering. They grow the crops for sale. Without irrigation, they would have been left with nothing after selling their animals.
The water from this river has really helped us.
We pump this water more than 3 kilometers away, where we grow different types of fruits, including watermelon, sweet melon, mangoes, chilies, and so many other crops. This water has been so helpful during this time. It's 12 months now, and we haven't seen rain here. There is big competition for water, and other pastoralists come here with even more than 400 cows, which is a great threat.
They face many challenges due to drought. Wild animals are now targeting the farms as they look for food. The farmers have to stay up at night in shifts to keep them away from the irrigated land. The United Nations is issuing a $139 million flash appeal to provide assistance to 1.3 million people in Kenya who have been the hardest hit by severe drought.
But because of this drought, we are encouraging these farmers to diversify their livelihood in terms of maybe beekeeping, further production, and actually commercialize their crop enterprises.
According to the United Nations, the 2011 East Africa drought caused a severe food crisis across the region, threatened the livelihoods of 9.5 million people, and resulted in tens of thousands of deaths. Though the farmers are grappling with wear and tear from the machines, they also have to put their heads together to buy the parts and oil to aid the agriculture. They're hoping that soon the hard drought situation will come to an end. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Garissa County, Kenya.
Well, the UN AIDS agency has warned that West and Central Africa could see a rise in HIV infections and AIDS-related deaths in a few years. This is due to disruptions in health services due to the coronavirus pandemic. Prevention and treatment services for chronic illnesses have been severely interrupted since the outbreak. Nokutula Shabalala has that report.
The infection rates for HIV and AIDS-related deaths have been on a steady decline over the past decade. But West and Central Africa accounted for 22% of AIDS-related deaths in 2020. And around 200,000 people in West and Central Africa became newly infected with HIV last year. The UN AIDS agency says there could be more infection and deaths due to health services being significantly impacted by COVID-19. Health systems in the West and Central Africa region have been stretched by the coronavirus outbreak as governments divert scarce resources to tackle the pandemic.
We're quite worried that when all the data comes in, say for this year, that we might see a spike in new infections, and over a few years we might see more deaths. Why do we say that? Because we see, for example, that in a country like South Africa, the services for testing and testing and putting on treatment declined by 40% in one quarter of, I think, last year.
New HIV infections in West and Central Africa are growing fast among vulnerable groups. They include young girls and women, sex workers, drug users and prisoners. These people don't always have ready access to preventative measures and treatment.
We are seeing disruptions in prevention services, sometimes as high as 60%, sometimes in some countries. That if prevention decreases, then you are talking of more new infections. We're seeing fewer people, and quite a number of people more people falling out of treatment. We know this happens because either they fear to go, or they are not even able to go because of lockdowns, or they fear because they think they'll get a virus there.
UN AIDS has urged African leaders to invest more in the fight against HIV/AIDS. This includes increasing their annual budgets to accommodate newly infected people. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Senegal has honored 13 members of the 18th Medical mission before their return to China. The Chinese medical mission has been based at the Pekin Hospital Center in Dakar for 2 years. Their farewell ceremony was attended by representatives of the Chinese embassy in Senegal, as well as the country's health ministry. The Chinese specialists were decorated with the Medal of the National Order of the Lion. The Ministry of Health in Senegal applauded the mission's contribution to the national response against COVID-19.
I take the opportunity offered to me to pay a deserved homage to these courageous Chinese missionaries who during their stay in our country demonstrated the following behaviors: dedication at work, respect, showed initiative and a sense of responsibility and the ability to work as a team.
China and Senegal will continue to work together to deepen pragmatic medical health cooperation and bring the development of the Senegalese medical and health sector to a new level.
I'm very happy and also excited. The decoration has proved that our 2 years' effort has been recognized by Senegalese government and people, and we are proud of this.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more on Africa Live, including the latest in sport. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Egypt's foreign currency reserves have gone up to over $40 billion. And oil prices have risen ahead of the OPEC Plus meeting. What happened next? We'll tell you shortly.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in Egypt. The country's net foreign reserves went up slightly by about $29 million in the month of October to $40.8 billion, according to the most recent central bank data. Saudi Arabia recently announced that it had deposited $3 billion at the CBE. The kingdom has also extended the maturity of previous deposits with a total value of $2.3 billion. Now, in October, the International Monetary Fund said that it expects emerging markets and developing economies to experience a decline in the flow of foreign direct investments, as well as short and medium-term capital inflows, given the ongoing challenges caused by the pandemic. Now, remittances from Egyptians abroad also went up by a fairly interesting margin, 13.2% in the 2020-2021 fiscal year to $31.4 billion, up from $27.8 billion in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. And we're still in Egypt. The National Population Council over there says that the North African country's population went up by 500,000 just between April and June this year. Now, that's in stark contrast to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's advice back in October, where he argued that the ideal net increase for the Arab world's most populous nation will be around 400,000 people a year. Here's Yasser Hakim exploring the cause of this recent surge.
Fertility rates in Egypt stood at 3.5 children per woman in 2020, higher than the international rate of 2.4 children. A recent population increase of 500,000 in 3 months would mean there is an upward trend. Amra Hassan, who has announced the figures, says it's a worrying sign.
Egypt was a pioneer in family planning in 1965, during the Nasser era, when the Family Planning Higher Council was established, and now we are in 2020. While others have already solved the problem, we are 20 years late. And that's because we are inconsistent, depending on whether the leadership is interested or not. Now we have a historic opportunity, because the president is very keen on the issue and is mentioning it all the time. The real historic achievement is to end this problem we have inherited from the previous generations.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi had warned that for Egyptians to feel the fruits of successful economic reforms, population increase should not exceed 400,000 a year. It was 2.1 million in 2020. In spite of extensive awareness campaigns like 2 are enough, Egyptians have mixed feelings about family planning.
Population growth is not the issue. It's how we make good use of the people to increase production.
The one who has 2 kids is already suffering from expenses and high cost of living. Then how can you have more? I agree, we should have less children.
Many Egyptians believe that religion and tradition support having large families. Therefore, experts are calling for a diversified approach and consistency by the media and the state to counter the outdated beliefs.
It requires a lot of work on family planning, mainly to convince women to take the contraceptives and to provide them with high-quality health services. The women in the rural areas, who are the vast majority, don't care about economic growth. The woman has to feel that contraceptives are safe, effective, and don't have side effects. She has to understand that family planning will help improve her and her family's life. We also have to provide women with good education and religious preachings, as well as an economic empowerment to create the awareness for family planning.
Meanwhile, the government is studying another measure to cut on fertility rates by reducing social welfare and food subsidy points to families with more than 2 children. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Away from Egypt, global oil prices dropped on Thursday after OPEC and its allies agreed to basically stick to their original game plan to continue raising oil output by 400,000 barrels a day each month. That is the agreed to increase schedule for the month of December. Now, this move comes despite calls from the United States to increase supply by an even larger margin in order to tame a steep rise in prices. Remember, Brent crude futures have gone up by over 60% so far in 2021. Supply restraint and production bottlenecks among OPEC Plus members have combined to underpin a rally that has pushed Brent crude to a multi-year high over $86 a barrel. Brent crude was down 46 cents to $81.53 a barrel by 17:13 GMT. The intraday high so far is $84.49. The US crude benchmark, WTI, was down 75 cents to $80.11 a barrel at the same time, well off the session high of $83.42. Speaking of the US, the Federal Reserve will start reducing its bond purchase program down from the $120 billion a month that it's been pumping into the economy for over a year now to support it through the damage inflicted on the economy by the pandemic. But as Owen Fairclough reports, the tapering is the easy part compared to the intertwined moves that come next. 1, controlling inflation, but 2, figuring out how much to raise interest rates without harming investment, employment, or economic growth.
Inflation is almost everywhere you look in the US and beyond, and the central bank needs to cool it down to moderately above its 2% target. And that means weaning the economy off trillions of dollars spent nursing it back to health since the pandemic crash. So the Fed will this month start scaling back these amounts until the stimulus program has been wound down by next summer.
Our decision today to begin tapering our asset purchases does not imply any direct signal regarding our interest rate policy. We continue to articulate a different and more stringent test for the economic conditions that would need to be met before raising the federal funds rate.
And it also has to tackle inflation running at its highest level for decades, and that's where things become complicated.
While supply chain bottlenecks have been blamed for demand outstripping supply and driving up prices in some cases, interest rates have also played a big part. The Fed has kept its main benchmark rate at near zero since the pandemic began to make money cheaper for borrowing, investing, and for encouraging consumers to spend. But that also contributes to inflation, and that interest rate is staying where it is for now.
So the Fed has to walk a fine line by raising interest rates, possibly by the end of the year, to help restrain price rises, but doing so without making conditions so tight that employers stop hiring, derailing a recovery whose fragility was demonstrated by the impact of the COVID-19 Delta variant. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
One final story for you. Small businesses are considered to be the backbone of Indonesia's economy. But during the pandemic, many of them were forced to shut down, given strict lockdowns and pandemic restrictions. But this crisis also provided an opportunity for e-commerce platforms to help millions of SMEs across Indonesia to digitize their operations. Here's Silkina Aluwalia now looking at how the rise of e-commerce is helping to contribute to Indonesia's economic growth.
In the past year, Arif learned how to pivot his business. As Indonesia closed off and went into lockdowns, online stores opened up. Arif's food stall was one of them.
In the past year, shifting online has allowed us to get discovered by more people. As a result, we were able to target consumers in more than one area, and now we have opened a few branches across the city.
Arif now operates his stall off of 3 e-commerce platforms, and so far he's seen a massive increase in sales.
Government data shows that food businesses were among the most successful during the pandemic. Online sales of food products increased more than 300% since the beginning of the pandemic in early March 2020.
Experts say now is the time to help small businesses to thrive in order to boost Indonesia's overall economic growth.
If we talk about Indonesian economy, a huge part of the Indonesian economy is actually dominated by the small and medium enterprises. In terms of the numbers, SMEs accounts for about 98% of the total number of business units in Indonesia. And their contribution to GDP is about 60%. So it's a huge part of it. So if we want to talk about the Indonesian economy, actually a majority is the small and medium enterprises. And so does, if we want to talk about economic recovery from the pandemic, SMEs is actually play a major role in this, in the Indonesian economy.
Tokopedia, one of Indonesia's largest e-commerce platforms, is doing just that. Throughout the pandemic, they've supported millions of small businesses and made it easier for them to digitize their companies.
Adaptations, innovations, and collaborations are very important for us. There are a lot of traditional markets. Traditional markets usually very crowded. But then we talk to governments, and then we create a pasar online. It's an online. We bring the offline traditional shops into adopting technology. Right? It turns out the result is very good. As long as we stick to our vision and missions, as long as we allowing everybody to become an entrepreneurs, give them a very easy way, and also we really building bridges, not building walls. Right? We're building bridges together with a lot of our partners. We believe that the future is bright.
This proves that COVID-19 strengthened the spirit of small businesses and inspired them to innovate and adapt to a digital economy. Silkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
And that wraps up our segment. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though, in Global Business. We'll be focusing on the China International Import Expo. It's a 4th successive edition of this particular event. It's opened its doors, at least 3,000 different businesses displaying in this year's event. But what does this tell us about the state of trade between China and economies here in Africa? We'll explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
Thanks for that, Ronald. We'll see you at the top of the hour. For now, let's take a short break. When we return, we tell you how a South African artist is turning township homes into art galleries.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Thanate, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, a young South African artist who turns township homes into galleries has had to get creative to keep his business going in the absence of tourists. Sipio Ngwenya has run the Mababangeng Township Arts Experience for the last 20 years. It's helped create an income stream for artists, homeowners, and others who are linked to the project. Ngwenya has had to turn to virtual exhibits, with South Africa's businesses still turning slow. CGTN's Julie Shaya has more.
I'm Sipio Ngwenya, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm doing so many different artwork in so many different formats. I didn't have a place to exhibit. I went to a big gallery, which was basically telling me that I should come back after 2 years. They really broke my heart in a specific place, but also invigorated me. And I decided I'm gonna just start here. Maybe my artwork should be creating a gallery out of the space that I left because there was nothing there. To do this in this space took at least 8 years because I had to first learn in different other townships around the country, in KZN, in Cape Town, in Potchefstroom, even outside the country. All the artists that I had met, they came and put all the murals here. We've created a beautiful model of how this artwork can work for other people here, about how to workshop homeowners into being gallery homeowners and to working with travelers. This space here is just one of these spaces here in Alexandra Township. There are other houses and shacks as well that we have turned into art galleries. COVID-19 taught us a very big lesson. Only a few are traveling. So it's gonna affect a lot of small businesses who are in travel or who are in the arts, you know. So now we've created a virtual format for the experiences. We put 360 cameras here in all the houses, in different other experiences, so people can still work with the tour guides, still get to see in a virtual reality format what's inside the shack or the house. My exhibition is called the Townships into Towns exhibition, and basically follows all my work as a multimedia artist. My artworks deal with very imaginary figures, which I say come from the sun. And it's really the elderly people that I meet in Alexandra Township, especially in Shebeens, who will have hair made out of trees that I draw. So those are the illustrations that I have, which are beyond this world, very realistic. There's virtual reality, there's clothes, there's experiences like this one here. There's stories about destination development where you see the back end of how we create these things. I've got like a film that I shot in Antarctica, you know, which I was working with local young people from Alexandra Township. So when people get to the exhibition, they'll get to see how they can take part in our theme of turning townships into towns.
Let's now take a short break. Some sport action when we return, including Egyptian giants Wadi Delga finalized preparations for the inaugural CAF Women's Champions League.
Mount Kilimanjaro, an icon of Africa. For centuries, this has been a mystical destination for adventurers and explorers alike. CGTN will attempt to take you to the top of this beautiful and dangerous mountain. We'll be looking at what makes it such a draw to so many people around the world each year. Kilimanjaro is many things to many people. It is a fragile ecosystem, but it's also a place of work for the thousands of people who live on her slopes. This is a journey of stamina, fraught with hazards and extreme conditions at every turn.
Good job.
Africa Live. Find your voice.